Hi everyone, and welcome to Sensory Moments. This is a podcast where we talk all things sensory. I'm your host Shruti, and co-hosting with me is Park Sensory promoter and director Sandeep Budhiraja. Our guest today is an aficionado of consumer science. He is an extremely well-known and well-respected person in consumer science. Please welcome Mr. Bao Do of Mondelez from Singapore. Hi, Bao.
Hi, Shruti. Hi, Sandeep. Hope
So
you are doing well. Thanks for having me.
that's, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's like I'm new, but what I've heard from Sandeep, I'm really excited for our episode today.
And introduce myself quickly. I basically work in consumer science for more than 10 years. I had a background of a PhD in consumer science, sensory science in France. And also, extended experience working in, France and also in Asia across FMCG space. Yeah, so very happy, to discuss this topic with you, which is, close to my heart from both a background and professional career perspective.
All right. So, about would you like to tell me like when was the first time where you were like introduced to sensory or consumer science, and what made you think that yeah, this is what I want to do passionately, like this is my passion?
Yeah, so Kruti, as I just quickly introduced myself, I started my first half of my career as a product developer, winemaker in France, and you are a winemaker. It's come to making wine, but also tasting wine every day. Yeah, so testing, sensory science, sensory evaluation, had been always a part of my professional journey from the early years. And back to in France, but then one thing I realized that there's a whole difference between testing alone and testing in a scientific manner, generating data and put it into uh, you know uh, into an insight and learn from it, learn from the data generated out of the testing, and that divide. Basically in a simple manner, what sensory science is going beyond the act and the activity of just testing, and it came along in my career. Going through that journey of doing simple testing as a winemaker who had to control the quality of the wine and also make sure it tasted good, to leveraging sensory science and to make sure not only the taste tastes good for myself but also for the consumer and for the market. And the consumers and the market is not one person, it's not two people, it's a cohort of consumers, is a whole population. And in a cohort of consumer or large populations, you have larger diversity when it comes to taste preference and how you can design a product that could be wide in my past experience, or that could be anything, food and beverages nowadays, to delight a larger cohort and a large population of consumers, and that requires science, and sensory science is part of it.
Sandeep, would you like to ask anything to Bao?
About how is it? I mean, in the liquor or the alcohol industry, there is a concept of master blender or the master taster. How does it relate to sensory? And because I've had clients who have come to me and said, while yes, we're looking at you for doing sensory research, but don't you have masters tasters? But our sensory panelists, while they have sensory equity, they're not really master tasters. So, what's your viewpoint on that?
It's very interesting questions. The simple answer is a master blender, right, or a sensory panel. They they are two different kind of group of people, and they hold two different set of expertise, and they may have to answer to different questions. And let me try to develop it. started from a master blender. Master blender is someone who is an expert, who have a certain standard and a view and vision of how he wants a product, and in this case, that could be a whiskey, that could be a wine, or that could be a beverage as end product tastes like. And with that vision, he tried to put to pull in different elements, different kind of ingredients, different or different portion of the product, and blend them together and to achieve the end results, which is a sensory profile that he envisioned, beforehand, right? So that's the approach. That's the blender, and put it simple, that's a expert approach. So he envisioned how consumer and the market preference is, and he used his expertise and skills to blend and to make the product and bring it to the point he envisioned for the consumers and the market. Yeah, that's his job. uh, the job of the sensory panel is different. The job of sensory panel, if I put it in a simple term, is human instrumental measurement tool. So basically, put it simple, you have machine to measure everything technically. If you have machine to measure pH, acidity, amount of sugar, but you don't really have a machine to measure the sweetness and the sourness, right? And sweetness is different from simple sugar amount or content. Sourness is different from simple, acidity content. Even though they are related, but they are not the same concepts, and they are not 100% correlated one to another. So you have machine to measure acidity, pH, or sugar content, or so on. So let's say the chemical content of whatever the product and the food and beverages. But when it comes to measuring subjectively the human perception, we that requires human so far. Okay, so far it requires still human, and the sensory panel, who is a group of people who get trained, calibrated, uh, and able to generate a description and measurement in a subjective and repeatable manner of the sensory properties of the product. They do that job, yes, instead of the machine who is not the machine who is not able to do that job so far. Yeah, so it's very much analytical. Yeah, using leveraging human senses. Yeah, that's a job of a human panel. Yeah.
Thank you. Bao, would you like to take us through the background where you started? How did you come to do a PhD? Some work that you did, and how long have you? What kind of exposure you had across different industries in different countries?
Yeah, so I had a food and food technology and science background, and I did that in France. And in France, wine making uh, was part of, let's say, they call that viticulture is a part of agriculture. Unlike in other countries, that's a separate industry, but in France, it's part of agriculture as an industry. And the path from food science to winemaking science is very close. And sensory is a tool. Sensory is also a science underneath, right? And is also a tool to assist, the journey of product development or winemaking, wine development. So that's kind of coming from food technology and science background and going to sensory science from my experience and the exposure I had in France and education I had in France is a very close and direct path. Yeah, that could sound quite surprising when we come to Asia, for example, it's another context. If you talk about food science, technology, and wine industry and sensory, do you have the feeling that okay, they are close, but they are not directly connected? Over there in Europe, in France, as example, they are really very closely connected as different pieces of expertise within a larger industry. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Is when we get a brand or a product across different countries in Asia Pacific, how do you make sure that it gets received well across all countries with their own different cultural traditions and tastes?
Yeah. So as a fact, we know that different consumer cohorts or consumer from different countries and geographies have different exposure to food habits, right? And culinary traditions, and by consequence, they may have different taste preference, and they expected different, slightly different taste profile. So basically, their variability between consumer cohorts and countries. So that the fact that we embrace, and we try to accommodate two things. The first is about keeping a chassis, a kind of commonality, block in our product design, and to deliver a kind of set of sensory attributes consistently from market to market. So we define a set of attributes that we call core, that we need to keep and deliver across the market the same thing for consistency. Um, and we also define at the same time a few sensory attributes. And sweetness is one example of this, um, that we may adapt to the local preference, the palate of the local consumers. So in that example, you may have a product, taste almost exactly the same across the market, with the sweetness slightly vary between country to country.
Okay. So, so coming back to like the things you said, that yeah, it's different in literally every country. And so is there any example that you have seen a product that was supposed to be localized, supposed to be made for one cultural market, but it made like a huge impact, not just like in EMEA, but globally?
So, for example, you can take. There's so many examples, so many brands that you can take any um, any l- global brands of any food and beverages that you know. I don't want to cite the brands here, but you take the most well-known brands of food and beverages in the market, in the world, and you taste the product coming from different countries, you realize very quickly they they differ slightly in sensory taste profile, and if you really focus on it more, where the difference comes from, you may realize that many times, sweetness is the case, because as I explained here, sweetness is you know is is a thing, depending on the country. Consumer may have expectation to different level of intensity of the sweetness. Put it simple, if you go to Thailand, for example, you may have a product tasting of the same brand slightly sweeter than in China, where consumer expect a lower sweetness. Yeah, there are plenty of examples like that across many countries.
Okay. And while doing that, when it comes to like as from a point of view of a researcher or an innovator, when you want to make sure that there are something new in the market, how do you do it? Like, what are the challenges that you face mostly to convince the consumer to try it?
Yeah. So it's your question, I would take it as a question and a debate between uh, delivering something that consumer are familiar with as opposed to some, and in the other side, something which is completely new, differentiated, and consumer never experienced. So that's the two kind of extremities of the spectrum of familiarity and uniqueness, right? And if you go for something super familiar and not new at all, consumer would not really be interested, because why they are already available similar things and test profiles in the market. Why they do have to buy the same thing. But if you go for the other extremity, completely super new to the point of being strange, consumer may try it for once and they would not repeat their consumption and purchase. So that's the theory, and that's the reality everywhere. So that's why striving the sweet spot, the right balance between familiarity to secure consumer acceptance, and at the same time injecting uniqueness, distinctiveness into product design, to excite consumer and to propose to there something new and different. It's also very important to have a differentiated um, you know um, product and solution and proposal to the consumer. Yeah, so that's the challenge, of designing, a good product, and bundle. Yeah, so again, there's no magic in it. It's requires step by step approach and holistic understanding of the consumer current food habits and exposure, and also identifying the so-called under need or undermet need or unmet need, and try to deliver that, and targeting the right sweet spot of familiarity and uniqueness. And there's no magic formula for that, and it comes to leveraging experience and sensory science, and also experiment to get to that. Yeah, and experiment is also key. You hardly can come to that by simply, let's say, put it into AI and come up with ideal profile. Yeah, if I touch on AI or other tools that may help to the process of experiment and shorten it, but anyway, it comes to part of the experiment process still. There's no magic that okay at the fingertip you can generate something striving exactly the right sweet spot of familiarity and unique at the same time, right? It comes with hard work, experiment, and a lot of expertise put in.
All right. Thank you for that, Bao. Sandeep, would you
And
like?
how you come with such a great technical background, great understanding. But do you think, especially in Asia Pacific, but yeah, it gets reflected in your colleagues? When I'm saying colleagues from marketing, from sales, what do you think is the understanding level of sensory and common myths about sensory?
Okay, sensory science, consumer science, right?
Yes.
Uh, as a discipline, definitely is newer and younger in Asia as compared to in Europe and the US. Yeah, and then evidence is many of us working in this profession, we had our education in the Europe or in the US, and now we came back here in Asia working in this industry. If you look around, many of us. Uh, the second evidence is when you look around in Asia specific regions and try to recruit talent, limited, and you look around universities giving that type of education is also limited. There are a few of them, but not as many as in the US and in Europe. Yeah, so by consequence, lower availability in terms of talent pool and culture and let's say history, and by consequence, you know, less let's say less, I would say less popular at high level as a science. Is less popular here in Asia than over there in Europe and in the West and US, right? Uh, and and when you go into the workplace is that reality is also reflected, right? Unless you are in a large corporate where this science and this culture is driven globally and not regionally. So in a company like ours, definitely the understanding the culture and the expertise of this science is, you know, spread across the globe because it's driven globally as a function. We have a centralized let's say community and function where we drive culture and capability development within this sensory consumer science expertise globally, and we leverage the knowledge globally, we leverage experience globally. That's where we maintain and we achieve and maintains a level of expertise and experience and culture within this science very consistent globally. But when you come to, you know, smaller companies or not global company, you observe exactly the opposite reality. Yeah.
Shruti?
Yeah, that's right. So I wanted to ask that right now in the market, like there are a lot of small companies who are like into customizing, and like they, like even though they are small scale, they look for preferences that what a single individual, or like you know how customization is. So how do like you like not compete, but how do you keep up with that, like because being a large organization, like these cannot like work for, they cannot customize for every single customer. So how do you make sure, how do you maintain that?
Yeah. So if I understood well, the question is about, you know, consumer preference and how to tap on, you know, different types of consumers and their preferences. And some of them may be more niche and that requires customization. So I think the diversity of consumer preference is a fact, is a reality. Uh, and within, if you zoom into that topic, it's also always underpinned by a set of commonality and a set of specifics when it comes to sensory attributes and deliveries. Uh, so so when we say consumer individually are different in terms of preference, that's true. Uh, that's true, but also they share a set of commonalities. So if you do, let's say I talk a little bit technicality here, when you do segmentation of consumer preference by in sensory co-preference mapping, right? You do the sensory study, you do consumer preference study, you put them together, you do preference mapping, and you come up with clusters of consumer preference by their preference. And you look into each of the cluster or segment of consumers by their preference, and you try to figure out what sensory attributes driving the consumer preference in within each of those segments. So you compare those set of sensory attributes which you call drivers of liking and disliking between those segments. You realize there are some common drivers of liking and some specific drivers of liking. So with that, if you want to make definitely that you need to deliver, if you want to please to every consumer, so you need to deliver absolutely the common drivers of liking, right? And then if you want to customize to each of segments, you need to deliver the other set of sensory attributes, which is specific drivers of liking or drivers of liking specific for each segment, and they are different from the common common set. Yeah. So that's the approach of how you either go for tapping on the big population gen pop, let's say in terms of product design, or customize your product design to specific segment of consumers. Yeah, and it's a choice. It's if you go for the large population or you go for more specific segment of consumers by customization. It's a choice of different companies. Everyone has different strategies and priority.
No, I have a different question in mind. So you talked about, sorry, you talked about like there were a lot of challenges back when, it was like during COVID, when people had like everything about like health was on an edge and they just wanted to have a healthy lifestyle. What were the challenges that you had to face sensory? Because during that time maybe there were not a lot of panelists or panels that were running, and what was like, how did you manage that? Because there were a lot of changes in products as well, so how do you keep up with that?
Yeah, I mean, you work in market research, as an agency, and we work in sensory market and consumer research from the industry side, and we all face the same set of challenges during COVID and after COVID, right? During COVID, with the social distancing and everything, that everything happened online, uh, and uh, and definitely, that when it comes to doing sensory studies, you need samples, you need to do the testing, conduct the testing, and you need to train the panel. But the experience is that all happen online. Well, for most categories, product categories, except for product categories like that requires a sophisticated samples preparation, the type of cooking, keeping consistent temperature. Yeah, that's why the industry face challenge. But for the other categories like ours, we are in a snacking categories, and our product are kind of ready to eat. It doesn't require cooking, so we do not have a whole lot of challenges. So it's happened well, and so with that, after COVID, what we learned is running sensory study online and having consumer panel at home is a thing feasible. And I mean, this practice still uh, can be, relevant, beyond COVID in many cases and in many categories. Yeah. So all in all, to sum up, my answer to that question is COVID is a time where we learn so many new ways of doing consumer research, sensory research, and it happened not perfectly, but we found solutions, agile solutions to make that happen. Yeah.
Right.
So, go ahead, go ahead.
No, no, I was just gonna ask him like, because like sensory, a lot of people still don't know what sensory is and why it is necessary. So what would you advise, or like what would you like to tell those people that how it is going to benefit like for the products and the market?
Yeah. So the question is how to explain. If I take the question in another way, is how to explain sensory science in a simple manner and convey the message about the benefit of having that science as part of your toolkits helping the business, right? Um, so in many people may understand sensory as simple as as a testing the products. And so I would like to reiterate that testing is important, and that's a key activity of the whole process of running sensory study. but it's just one step and one simple step. Uh, uh, you and I and Sandeep may sit, in a coffee shop and drink coffee and have a chat and do the testing. Are we doing sensory science? Uh, the answer is absolutely no. We are testing coffee. We are drinking coffee. We are not doing anything sensory science, uh, because sensory science it requires many further steps. And but the key thing to make it simple is about using human senses as an measurement instruments to come up with data, sensory data describing the sensory properties of the product in a scientific manner. And when I talk scientific, I refer to consistent, repeatable data that could help to generate insights and learning. Yeah. So coming back to the example of Shruti, you, Sandeep, and I sitting over coffee, having chat and drink coffee, and we did not really learn a lot on the coffee because we did not even bother, you know, describing and talking about the coffee and compare the coffee to another coffee. So it did not generate any data on it, and by consequence, no learning. Versus a sensory panel, they taste the same coffee and another one that generate data in a consistent and repeatable manner, and they would be able to, to do so for different products. And we as sensory scientists at the background can generate data, and using this data and come up with learning about each of those coffee in terms of sensory profile characteristics and attributes, and compare them between them all, and also connect those data into with consumer liking data, and sometimes doing modeling of those to generate even further understanding and prediction. We may come up with something along the line of how to make uh, a better like coffee for the consumers, leveraging data, leveraging predictive modeling, which is a part of the sensory science. And that's far beyond the testing activity that Sandeep, Shruti, and I have, over a chat, Yeah. So it's a simple way to explain how sensory as a science can contribute to the whole journey of product development, design the product, and the packaging and the solution and the bundle to delight the consumers in the scientific manner.
So, taking from what you said about why should the top management or the management who is holding the budgets really take consumer science seriously? What does consumer science exactly do for top management that they should invest in it? Uh, the resources, because those resources can also be used for other things. Why? What does consumer science, in essence, brings to the table?
Consumer science as an essence bring to the table is basically a few things, uh, but the larger thing is consumer centricity, consumer closeness, or consumer voice. We bring consumer voice, consumer feedback into the process of designing uh, conversions and delivering a product or a solution, and to delight consumers, and at the long run secure sustainable business growth by 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 driving consumer repeat purchase and repeat consumptions. You like to delight consumers so that they come back to the product and consume the product again. And that's in that sense the job of consumer science and sensory science. Uh, to your questions, to put a point on budget and resources on it, I mean, we all know uh, that's a topic. Uh, Budget and resources at a larger picture invested into research function in any organization. It depends on definitely two things. Number one is how that organization see the value in the functions, research functions. And when I talk about research function, that can be consumer science, that could be sensory science, that could be also insights, data analytics, and everyone within the research space, right? So it depends on how the organization see the value and how the functions prove to the organization that we are bringing value. That's two ways, right? And we are happy to be in the organization here that I mean, both ways are happening very well. The organization see the value in the research functions helping the business, and at the same time the research function delivering well and shows well, deliver well to the values to the business, yeah, by bringing in consumer centricity, consumer voice, yeah.
So if I was to summarize for you, and I take the liberty of summarizing for you, consumer centricity and consumer voice leads to risk reduction because you design better products which give better success in the market. Chances of better success in the market, it's not 100% assured that every product will succeed, but by doing all this, we get products which are reduce the risk of failure. So you need to understand the consumers to design better products. How does a so leads to the next question? How does a consumer scientist define his, or and I'm saying not really a scientist, I'm saying anybody who's a senior in consumer science, define his role in the company? What role does he play as a business supporter, as a leader, as where how should they see that themselves?
Yeah. So definitely we are a function where, let's say, well valued within. I'm talking about consumer science is a function well valued within the larger organization. Uh, yeah, for all the reasons that I developed earlier. And now to your questions, um, our role is really, is or our, in other words, our impact is really, depends on where we position ourselves as a professional, within the organization. So we can position ourselves as a supporter or a business partner or a leader. That are basically, in a simple manner, three different levels of how we position ourselves, right? So first level, as a supporter, we focus very much on the purely and simply on the technicality aspect, on the technical aspect and uh, deliverables, right? We make sure that what we do is rigorous, technically speaking, and that's it. And we hand over to the outcome to the next step, to the you know next step of the project flow or the process. That's the basic level of how you position and you work, right? But then there's a higher levels of involvement than that. So the next level is being a equal partner to the business. So that's where you get involved in a larger discussion and sometimes broader than just your technical area of expertise. So you involve more on business discussion, you take more some business acumen, and you try to build a holistic picture of understanding the business, the market, and the consumers, and drive it forward and contribute into your contribution to the success of the project and the business, right? And the next level is, become a thought leader. So thought leader is about you, the higher level with experience, with time, with legacy that you build along the years in the organization and the recognition that you receive from the stakeholders and the organizations. You can shape yourself as a thought leader and leveraging your business acumen, your consumer centricity, your sensory and consumer insight expertise to drive forward initiative that you proactively put forward to help the business. Yep. So depending on where you are in the journey, you can kind of customize your role and your impact and position yourself in this skill.
Thank you, Bao. Uh, Great answer. Would you want to share any experiences, any cases where you have used consumer centricity or your team has used, you might not want to name the brand, but that helped crack open the market, that helped the brand succeed, the brand or the product succeed in the market?
Definitely, there are many of them. Uh, there are many of them in terms of ways of working, in terms of using different methodologies with agility, driving agility in the research. I mean, top of mind to me, very simple example that I can two simple example, just in terms of ways of working to illustrate that idea. One is related to the earlier question that Shruti asked on during COVID. How did we do still um, keeping doing consumer research and uh, keeping the business and the research and the business going. So the answer is that during COVID time, at first during the first few months and first few weeks, we get a little freeze, did not know what to do, but then quickly you realize that there are alternative ways to do consumer research and sensory research from distance or online and so on. And nowadays it's become a kind of alternative to offline research, right? To face-to-face research. That's a classic example across the industry. The other example, top of mind to me, still related to consumer centricity. And as very simple example, I still recall once we had a product lab and focus group series of focus group in Japan, and then instead of after every the whole series of focus group, the normal practice is okay. Everybody got so tired, and we go home and waiting for the agency's top line or report. That's basically in the past that was the kind of normal practice. But if you bring the consumer centric into your way of working, and that's what we did. Basically, we gather even very tired. We gather the whole team right after the last focus group, and we say, "Okay, guys, we would not take a lot of time, but just half an hour, 45 minutes, and we want to sit together and kind of dump in all the hot on the press, top of my key learnings, top of mind, right? The keyword is top of my key learning that we learned over the past 4 or 5 days of focus group right away now, right after the last focus group, instead of waiting a few days later, right? So it's a simple example of just the how, in terms of way of working. You keep being consumer centric in even in a simple action of and simple and timely action in terms of way of working, and you run the research. And there are plenty of other examples that I don't have top of mind right now. Yeah, but that's the mindset. That's a mindset, and that mindset cuts across the ways you run a research, your ways of working, your ways of briefing, your ways of research, your way of putting up a brief, your way of driving data analysis, your way of driving uh, uh, recommendation, and also your way of choosing different type methodologies and alternatives, keeping agility and rigor in mind at the same time.
Thank you. Shruti?
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask, I think the last question. So about like someone who is a fresher or like a student who is studying or looking to studying for a food science or consumer science, what is the advice that you will give that person?
Okay, so should I understand the question is kind of the criteria how we do see how we select a good young talent to become a sensory consumer scientist. Is that the question?
Yeah, that too. And why? Like, why should someone pursue this career?
Okay, okay. So yeah, so the question is about let's say what is interesting in this career path to pursue, right? Basically, that's the question. Uh, yeah, yes, I think definitely there are many reasons, right? Top of mind for me is there are a few. Number one is um, it's a kind of science sitting between the so-called art and science. It's not a hard science like I would say mathematics, physics, right? But it is neither a soft, so-called soft, okay? It's just analogy, sociology, kind of science, right? Or psychology, science. It sit in the between because it encompass all of those. So being a consumer and sensory scientist, you need some skills coming from statistics and definitely deriving from mathematics. So that slide is a kind of so-called hard science related, right? But then you have the other part of understanding consumer psychology, understanding the psychology of how the senses work. What is how the interaction between, simple example, between the sight and the perception taste, of the taste and the flavor, right? So it's a cognitive psychology, right? So is so on that, and also the aspect of understanding the consumers as a cohort of humans. So what is the difference in terms of the needs, the motivation, and the problem to solve of a young cohort of consumers versus a elder cohort of consumer? They are different in their life stage, so they have all of those elements are different. So understand them as different cohorts of humans, that requires some kind of soft skills and expertise coming from psychology, from coming from um, social science. Yeah, so sensory science, consumer science sits in between, encompassing all of them. So it's very enriching and it's a very diverse as an expertise, right? And that's the interesting part of the job. Yeah, uh, I think the second reason is related to one of the questions that you asked me, Sandeep, earlier, and my answer was about the availability of the pool of talents within this science and profession in Southeast Asia is still limited. That's my observation over the past more than 10 years working in this uh, industry and in this profession in Asia. There's still a lot of room to grow as an industry, and also a lot of work to do for in terms of workforce. So with that, put it in simple terms, I believe you can quite easily find a job in this industry if you are a sensory and consumer scientist in APAC. Yeah. So those two reasons, I think that's interesting to be in this profession. And also the third reason, definitely, I already developed earlier. You the in large organization and consumer centric organization, you can find very easily your role to play, and making an impact on the business.
Thank you so much. Wow, very, very impactful. Thank you so much. Any last thoughts,
Thanks,
anything
Sandeep.
that you want to pass on a message or
No, I think my last thought and comment is just I would like to thank you for having me discussing about this topic, and also I would like to really give you kudos on running that series of podcasts on that topic of sensory consumer science, which is still kind of relatively niche, not niche, not rare, but still niche in this region, and also having stakeholder, having partners like you driving the understanding, the awareness about this expertise and this profession forward is a very beneficial thing for the community, and I appreciate that. Thanks, Sandeep and Shruti, for having me, and looking forward to discussing and having you, and meeting you more and discussing with you more in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bao.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Shruti and Sandeep.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. And to our viewers, thank you so much for being part of our podcast. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you like to know more about Sensory, please comment below. Till then, stay tuned for more episode of Sensory Moments.